Last week we were talking about love your enemies, which essentially is have no enemies. And then we were talking about, like, we have these egos and we have to, like, I want to get credit and what about me and things like that. And saying sometimes even in Good Shepherd, right, if two people have a ministry to do and for whatever reason they both got to do it, you just say, like, you have it. You take that. It doesn't matter who does it, just as long as whatever is in the best interest of Good Shepherd. And I just thought I wanted to say this to you as a member of the parish family, that I wanted to also do that. So I want you to know that whenever there is anything that is difficult to do, especially if it's difficult, any kind of a task, things that require a lot of time and a lot of effort and commitment, I'm always willing to give it away to Donna. I just give. It's like the gift that keeps on giving. So let's take a look at this scripture passage and let's get a little backdrop as to what's going on. So to remind you that Matthew's gospel is always going to try to tie in the Old Testament. So you'll often hear, this was done to fulfill the words of the prophets. This was done in a similar fashion. What happened to Moses happened to Jesus. So they're trying to communicate to people that Jesus is the new Moses. So if you recall, on the Sinai Peninsula, the Israelites escaped Egypt, and now they're on the Sinai Peninsula, and they start to moan and groan that they're hungry. And they're going, what's going on here? We'd be better off in Egypt. At least we had 3 square meals. And so they're complaining, and the next thing you know, there's manna coming down from heaven. Bread from heaven is given to them to eat. And then they start complaining that there isn't any water, that they're thirsty. And so Moses takes his staff and strikes this rock and tests God, and water comes out. And then when Moses is up on the Sinai Peninsula, the Mount Sinai, to get the 10 Commandments, he comes back down and they're worshiping the golden calf, drinking, and just going crazy with their behavior. So then we see these 3 temptations and how they perfectly coincide with the temptations that occurred in the Sinai Peninsula. So here's Jesus in the desert. He knows he's called. He knows he has this mission. He goes into this desert. He goes away because he's got to figure out, how am I going to fill out this messianic mission? And he's tempted in different areas. He's tempted to turn these stones into bread. He knows you're hungry. Have this food. And then also, he's also thinking of what's his orientation, his life principle is going to be when he's trying to lead people to the living God. So Satan is also saying, give people whatever they want. Give them what they want and they'll follow you. Fulfill their every wish externally and they'll follow you. Next, he's tempted to throw himself down from the parapet of this high building, this temple. Let someone else, let your Father and the angels catch you. Avoid responsibility, Jesus. Let somebody else do it. Avoid responsibility. And Jesus says no. And then, of course, look at all of Jerusalem. Look at Manhattan and Las Vegas. It's going to be your playground. I'm going to give you all of this if you just bow down and worship me. And Jesus is like, I'm having none of it. My heart only belongs to the living God, and only God will I serve. Now, it's interesting that if we were to take orientations in psychology, you have different schools of thought. So one school of thought would be like Sigmund Freud and the people who followed him, and they would say that, hey, let me tell you something. Here's what runs human beings. They ask themselves one question. What's going to give me the most pleasure? What's going to be the thing that I want to do most? And I'm only going to do what gives me pleasure and what makes me happy. Even people who give up themselves, Freud would say, they're only doing it to make themselves feel better. It makes them feel good to give, and that's why they do it. This is this life principle, this orientation of pleasure, that we live for pleasure and what makes us happy. So every day we wake up in the morning and we say, what's going to give me the most pleasure? The next line of thinking or psychologist is William Adler and all those guys, where they said, no. Here's what drives human beings. Human beings are into power. They want to influence. They want to control. They want to have it their way. This is what is the orientation, the life principle of people. They want power. They want control. And they want to dominate. And the third guy, B.F. Skinner, who was a behavioralist, he would say that, hey, you know what? We're all programmed. You know, those first 5 or 6 years of our life, whatever happens during those years, 8 years, that you've been conditioned, and however the way you are right now, it's not your fault, it's not your responsibility. What else are you going to do? I mean, look at what happened to you when you were a kid or when you were a young adult. Avoid responsibility. And interesting, the word responsibility, inherent in that is the ability to respond. So we might not be responsible for things that have happened to us, but we are responsible for the way we respond. We are able to respond to the things that have happened to us. We can be bitter or resentful or blame, or we can come out from underneath that and say, nothing has ever happened in my life to prevent me from being responsible and creating the life that I want to create for myself. So isn't it interesting that the 3 temptations in the desert are also the 3 things that leading psychologists say really run human beings? Pleasure, power, and the avoidance of responsibility. And Jesus says no to all 3. And he comes out of that desert with one thought in mind. This is how I'm going to lead people to the living God. This is how I'm going to lead people to my Father. I'm going to love them. I'm going to love them and empower them with the power and the spirit of that love. I'm not going to give them everything they want. I'm not going to let them have all this power, and I'm not going to tell them, yeah, just kick back and relax and let somebody else do it. No. The kingdom of heaven, to create the kingdom of heaven, we must participate in it. We can't abdicate that and give it off to someone else and avoid that responsibility. When I was 29 years old, 31 years ago, I was newly ordained. I was a priest about a year at St. Andrew's in Bayonne, and there was this guy, Tommy, who had just graduated college, and he had taken all these religion classes, and he thought, oh, what a bunch of crap. You know, this religion and God, and it's ridiculous. And he would always come in and want to talk to me and break my horns. And he'd say to me, like, you know, are you out of your mind? You're a priest? What do you guys get, like $2 an hour? What do you get paid? And so we just had a pay increase, $2.25 an hour. And then he'd say to me, and the celibacy thing, are you out of your mind? You're 29 years old. Have you ever heard of women? I go, yeah, I've heard of women, and you know what? I'm quite aware of them too. You like that, huh? I'm aware of you. So, you know, he would always be breaking my chops. So then I didn't really see him for a while, and it was almost a year and a half, 2 years went by. And I saw his mother at church, and she says, I want to talk to you. I go, okay. I go, by the way, how's Tommy doing? He's got stage 4 cancer. He's terminally ill. And of course, 30 years ago, right, they didn't have what they have today. So Tommy's dying, and he knows it. And could you see him in the hospital? I was like, of course. So when I actually saw him later on that day, and I go walking in, and his bald, He's been thinned out from the chemo. And he said, I'd like to talk to you about dying and what that's like for me. I'm like, I can't even imagine. You're 24. He said, it's kind of really sad. He said, you know, it's funny, we were talking way back when, and he would say to me, like, you know, am I ever going to find God? He goes, and I remember you saying to me, I don't know if you're going to find God, but I do know this, God is going to find you. It was funny that he had remembered that from a while ago. He said, I remember when you told me that, and I thought to myself, I'm 24. I'm not going to make the millions that I was going to make, and I wanted to be with women, you know, have a few cocktails, live life. He goes, and now I'm saying bye to all of that. And it dawned on me, the only thing that I really had was that I loved my family and I loved my people in my life. He goes, so you know what I did? I went to my father, and we did not have a good relationship. And I said, Dad, I want to talk to you. Get the newspaper up. No, Dad, this is important. I want to talk to you. And still the newspaper's up. What do you want? What's up? He says, Dad, I want you to know that I love you. I really love you. And the newspaper came down. He says, I just want you to know how proud I am to be your son. So they're crying, hugging each other. I'm crying in the hospital room. He goes, and then I went to my sister, my kid sister, who I would have always bust her chops and mock her out, you know how I could be. And I said to her, I love you. It's so great to be your brother. And you're great. And then I went to my mother, which was a little easier than my father. And I told her, I love you. What a privilege it is to have you as my mother. And when I did that, all of a sudden, God came into my life, burst into my heart, and I got whacked like a thunderbolt of this presence of the divine by simply coming out and expressing that to my family. So Tommy was 24 years old, and he got it. And we were talking about things being said. He says, you know something I realized? You know what's even more sad than dying at 24 years old of cancer? Is to be 40 and 50 and 60 years old and still not get it. Still be clueless. Still think that life is about pleasure and adding up all your bank accounts and investments and acquiring things and trying to have a control and dominate other people. That's sad. This really isn't that sad. Because I get it. Tommy got the life principle of Jesus Christ. And I want to say to all the kids here, all these young people here, to know that that's what life is about. You have your whole life in front of you, and we all have the rest of our lives. That life is about love. Life is about developing that ability and giving it away and telling the people in your life that you love them. That's what life is about. So, we have these life principles, these primary orientations in life. Pleasure, power, and the avoidance of responsibility. And then we have this other life principle, the life principle of Jesus Christ, that comes out of that desert and knows the most powerful force on earth is this power of love as a life principle. So today we're asked the question, what's your life principle?